Welcome to the general quiz hosted by Quest SGGSCC in association with Quizadilla. Rules for the quiz. There are 20 questions. Each question is worth of 1 point. Questions 5, 10, 15, 20 are star marked questions. In case of persistent ties, time will be taken into consideration. Answers to be submitted through Google Forms. Moving on to question number 1. The term blue sky thinking refers to a form of creative brainstorming with no limits, restrictions, and judgments, with the aim of producing innovative and unconventional ideas. However, an international organization based in the United Kingdom is strictly against blue sky thinking and promises to fight anyone who's involved in it. Their apprehension towards the blue sky thinking does not make sense since the aim of the organization is to appreciate and enjoy a particular entity. The organization has over 45,000 members from 100 plus countries, and its website contains thousands of photos, videos, and paintings of this entity, submitted by its vast membership. Identify the organization or the entity. Moving on to the second question. In the 1980s, an American couple bought a store unit at a blind auction, and to their great surprise, found an iconic lost vehicle which they sold to a famous billionaire 2 decades later for over $1 million. When it was sold, it had articulated fins instead of wheels. It couldn't drive on land but could dive underwater using electric motors, ballast tanks, and propellers. The billionaire buyer revealed that he had been amazed by the vehicle's amphibious capabilities in his childhood and was now purchasing it to see if he could replicate the vehicle's technical advances in the 21st century. Which vehicle is being talked about and who was the buyer? Third question. In 1994, as a result of environmental policies, excess had to be removed from a particular area/region because one of the diseases that affected excess could potentially be contagious to an animal that was one of the most thriving species here. Initially, it was quite inconvenient, but as technology progressed, eventually mechanical methods started to replace and even outperform excess. On top of that, maintaining these was much easier than feeding and taking care of excess throughout the year. Give X and the area/region. Moving on to question number 4. A particular lecture hall in the Dash College was named in honor of Nobel Prize winning scientist who was pioneer of a certain branch of physics and spent much of his life in the city. However, recently, a series of articles revealed something horrible about this scientist. And due to this reason, the college is likely to rename its lecture hall to something else. There are also rumors that his most famous discovery, a certain equation, may get renamed at some point in the future. What does this article reveal? You'll get part points for naming the scientist. Fifth question. Japan has a series of Rover satellite missions that land on asteroids and are named after a certain bird. Basically, these missions aim to return samples of material from near-Earth asteroids for analysis. After arriving at the asteroid, the spacecraft studied the asteroid's shape, spin, topography, color, composition, density, and history. Most of us are aware of the name as of today due to a completely different popular Japanese engineering marvel. The name found fame in India during the early 2000s owing to pop culture. What name do the satellites and the beast of a machine share? Question 6. In an attempt to increase accountability and engagement with the climate change among business and politicians, with the future of the human generation very uncertain, a set of researchers in Tasmania and an Australian marketing company collaborated to set up Project X, the largest entity to record data linked to climate change before the fall of human civilization. X is the first piece of trustable information in the event of a mishap. Identify X. Moving on to question 7. In the early 2000s, a certain politician from Punjab sought the forgiveness of the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, the main governing body of Sikhism. He was asking for forgiveness on the behalf of his maternal grandfather, who was the Jathedar of the Akal Takht in the 20th century, had offered a Siropa, robe of honor, to a certain person and welcomed the person into the fold of the religion. Identify the person who was offered the Siropa. Question number 8. This word dates back to the 15th century England, where it was used to refer to a pouch or bundle. The Romans derived a Latin noun from this term, which meant leather bag or knapsack. In the 16th century, the term acquired a sense which meant supply or stock, such as a dash of knowledge. The word was first used in its present connotation in the House of Commons in the 18th century. Identify this term, which everybody seems to have an opinion. Moving on to question 9. The dash indicator is a way to tell the state of country's economy. As its name suggests, it involves the counting of how many dash are there. Basically, the idea here is that the cost of carrying out something is extremely expensive, thus the family members will often ignore it to not spend so much money and let the state carry it out in their stead. The theory is considered to be flawed because it does not take into account the dash used in research and some other unsalvageable cases. Fill in the blanks. There are two words and the blanks are not indicative. Moving on to question number 10. The parody dash was made by a US Republican based on the first opening sequence of a particular TV show. The name of the parody is evidently inspired by the name of the TV show. In the parody, the faces of refugees, along with his political rivals like AOC, are photoshopped on the faces of the main villains of the first season. Joe Biden is portrayed as the villain who kickstarts the show in the first place. The video originally aimed at a certain community was criticized because many of the villains get killed in the video. What was the name of the parody and what was the show it was based on? Something which is very much in limelight these days. Moving on to question number 11. This brand played an interesting role in the movie adaptation of an anti-materialistic cult novel. In the fact, the director once used that there is a dash or dash secretly placed in every frame of the film. In a quest to find each of them, a Tumblr user created a page where the author aims to track down each covert appearance of the item in the movie. Additionally, towards the climax of the film, the protagonist threatens to blow up an entity that sells this item. Which genius instinct of product placement is being talked about? Identify the product as well as the film. Moving on to question number 12. Burned by the Calvinist, shattered, and repeatedly stolen by greedy merchants, the Ghent altarpiece, painted in the 14th and 15th centuries, has often found itself at the center of controversies. In 1934, one of the smaller panels of the painting was stolen and never found. A few years later, a certain political figure expressed interest in the painting and sent it to his area of control, where it was reduced from a salt mine by a military unit composed of art historians known as X, who have been portrayed extensively in literature and cinema. Identify the figure and X. Moving on to question number 13. This activity is considered a sport in some countries and even has professional leagues of its own. The format is quite similar to a wrestling match, and the sport is usually organized in a fighting arena. The fighter has to primarily use a dash to attack, and moves such as legs, drop, submission holds, punching is prohibited with the match. The fighters are also not allowed to hold the opponent's arm while attacking. Identify this soft sport. Moving on to question number 14. Cuba's love affair with the 1950s era American cars is still intact, but the communist-run island also has a lingering attachment to a stalwart of Soviet era leftovers. Ranging from rusting relics to the pampered and the pristine, hundreds of old X's rattle through the streets of Havana. Some people make a living as an instructor teaching how to handle it. In Havana's traffic, where riders seem to be able to squeeze the machine through the narrowest of gaps. Havana's military acquired these utterly friendly things from Big Brother Moscow at the height of the Cold War in 1960s and 70s for use by the state factories and farms. Over the years, they gradually filtered down to the general public. Identify X. Question number 15. With the adoption of their historic citizen votes in the 2014 general election, a certain new type of tourism was legalized in a few states in the US. In a certain city, you can ride through the city in one of these custom-built vehicles, while the PA system played songs by Elton John, Bob Marley, etc. Appropriately, what were these vehicles called? Moving on to question number 16. This company had never commented on certain usage of their product until the mid-2010s, when it released a statement indicating it does not consider X a dirty word. They stated, X has made and continues to make a profound impact on our visual culture. Creative people all over the world have pushed publishing, art, and visual media forward using technologies that were either too complex or simply not possible before X. Like lots of technologies, indeed lot of products, X can be used in some unexpected, perhaps questionable ways in a free society. What is X? Question number 17. House MD is a TV series revolving how a physician, Dr. House, resolves his patients' problems. In a certain episode of the series, Dr. House is unable to figure out what had infected his patient with the latter's condition worse. However, he notices that his patient shows signs of recovery when she eats some chocolate dessert. Considering the description of how the patient was recovering, what was the appropriate title of the episode, a phrase that had a significant presence during the 18th century? Question number 18. Shown below is the flag of Kiribati. The waves represent the Pacific Ocean covering Kiribati. The three stripes represent the three island groups, and the bird represents power, freedom at the sea, and their culture. Considering that the Pacific covers a great part of Kiribati, what does the sun represent in the flag? Moving on to question number 19, the second last question. Connect these four people to a famous scene that takes place in a church. Even if you haven't seen the show, you must have definitely seen a snippet of the scene elsewhere. You need to give the connect between the four images. Now, moving on to the last question. It's a visual question as well. Identify the subject of this ad campaign, which was made to publicize its revamped version. Unfortunately, this couldn't stop its slow death. Ultimately, it started to regain its former glory only after it was renamed and completely overhauled a few years ago. Now I'll play the video.
You might not remember us, but we met in the 90s. We are members of Generation Y, as in yin yang, yo-yo. Life moved a little slower. Discs were square, desktop folders had personality. Extra storage space was just a zipper away. There was only one social network, but most of your friends died of dysentery. The only thing buzzing in your pocket was a pet. Until that died too. But at least a troll was still a friend. Lunch was a puzzle, not a picture. You were pumping jams, water, shoes. You didn't have to worry about a news feed full of farm animals. You were busy feeding wild animals. A haircut didn't cost $60. It cost 4 minutes. You really had nothing to lose. Unless, of course, you were playing for keeps. The future was bright. You grew up.
So that brings us to the end of the quiz. Thank you for participating, and please submit your responses on time through the Google.